Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Mind Games podcast. Today is going to be slightly different than before. I've interviewed so far a golfer, a rugby player and a Muay Thai fighter. Today we're tackling a much more serious topic that's prevalent in the world at the moment. I'm sure everyone's seen the tragedy of George Floyd's death and, the follow-on that has been the protests that have led to riots. And today I'm talking to Mr. Jan Wright, who's a good friend of mine and a friend of my family. And he served in the police force in New Jersey, Hamburg, for 25 years, was chief of police for his last 6 years of service. And I'm sure we'll get a very interesting view on the current situation, a bit about his experience in the police force and how do we move forward. So let's give a warm quarantine welcome to Mr. Jan Wright. If I can unmute him. Jan, can you hear me?
All right, are we on? Here we go. Good.
How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Yeah, how is America at the moment? Because I'm watching from the UK. We're seeing riots, we're seeing, police spraying tear gas. People are going crazy. What is it actually like being in the States at the minute?
It is a bit of turbulent times, particularly if you spend a lot of time watching the television.
Yeah.
Where I live is a much more rural, although I'm about an hour and 20 minutes from New York City in Times Square in that area of Manhattan. So from what I've heard, there are some localized protests going on in some of the smaller areas of New Jersey. But as I say, it depends on how much time you spend watching the news. It seems that it's generally turbulent, and then coming off of the pandemic that's going on, I would feel that tensions were high before this incident even occurred because of economic issues and just generally being cooped up. Humans don't do very well. Humans don't like that.
Yeah.
Even if it's for a good cause, that novelty wears off quickly.
So your initial reaction when you seen George Floyd's death and the treatment he received from the police, what was your initial reaction? Obviously serving the police, you'd have a different view on it.
I have not studied the video. I have seen bits and pieces of it, but my professional opinion with anything to do with police, because you're not the first person to ask me what my opinion on this. All police confrontations or anything to do with the public or specifically use of force issues, which can be scrutinized continuously. But to me, it always all comes down to police training. And it appears that some of the tactics that they used, whether they were condoned or not, it comes down to training, and not just for use of force issues. You're training for interview, interrogation, internal affairs, firearms training. It all comes down to training, and that's usually the first thing that goes. And as someone who led a police department, everything always, liability goes upwards, up the chain. If you have your lower level, patrol officers, not saying that they're at the lowest level, but they're, your people that are out on the street, they all reflect not only the training that they receive, but the culture of that police department. Historically, if you look back to the Rodney King incident, when that totally unfolded, whose head were they looking to really stick it to was the chief of police, Daryl Gates, at the time, because he is ultimately responsible for everything that goes on. I've had issues like that where there were complaints against my officers, and for whether it was use of force or even simple demeanor things, that is my responsibility as chief. And in that specific incident, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is, were they properly trained? Because that's a common issue also with officers that find themselves in this position, that they're going to turn right around and say, well, you didn't train me properly. And unfortunately, when budget cuts come, which coming off the pandemic and the COVID issues, if anything was going to get cut, it's going to be training. That's the first thing that always goes, because training equals money, whether it's ammunition for doing firearms training or just the time to train officers when they're not out doing their job.
So,
go ahead.
What I'm worrying about this particular situation is, you know, the officer was a veteran of 19 years. He was in the police force 19 years, and he'd also received 12 complaints to, as you're saying, the people higher above of misconduct and the way he was treating people. And I think that was the issue a lot of people had, that why wasn't he, you know, dealt with by the higher ups? And you mentioned there you've had to deal with people, let's say, below you when you were the chief of police. Did you ever have a similar situation where there was, you know, a racism issue or someone that was imposing their force maybe too much?
Not racial, just because of the odds of where I worked, that
Yeah.
there were not many minority people of any type, whether it was, you know, male. It just, we didn't have that type of environment that we were in. As far as somebody with numerous complaints, the way New Jersey internal affairs guidelines are written is it actually has a paragraph in there addressing specifically if you, it's almost like a way to take care of something before it becomes something big.
Absolutely.
And it's monitoring if you have, you know, a certain officers or certain that are getting, now there's nothing wrong with, you know, everybody can complain about you. That's not the point. But if you have the same type of complaints over and over, even if they are found to be justified or something, that needs to be an issue. Excuse me, that needs to be an issue that needs to be addressed for any reason, more, just as much as for liability issues.
Yeah.
If I had, you know, if I had issues that say, you know, I'm getting multiple complaints of the same general nature for one certain officer, I better well address it just to cover ourselves.
Yeah.
So if something bigger does come up, we can just lay every report out and say we investigated thoroughly every incident that occurred, and if there were things that needed to be addressed, we didn't just say we addressed it. We specifically put in there how we addressed it. Was it retraining? Yeah. You know, if the officer was found to actually to be wrong, well, how did we correct it?
Yeah.
You know, the key, the word in there is, you know, is to discipline, and not to discipline as you would think of as in, you know, spanking. You would discipline. The word discipline, you know, to retrain. Yeah. Because you may have an officer who's a real go-getter. He's interested in going out and, you know, as I like to say it, catching bad guys and helping people. Yeah. But the way he's going about it is wrong. Yeah. And that's easy. You know, you have somebody who's really wants to do their job to the best of their ability, which is nothing wrong with that in any profession. Yet maybe their delivery is a little off. Yeah. So a bit of retraining, and I've had that where, you know, there was a time where I had a lot of new officers coming in, and they were very enthusiastic about doing their job. And a couple of them I had to say, hey, you're doing, because I don't want to stifle them because they're doing well. It's just they need to learn a different way of going about doing it. And that also comes with experience, and also comes with the proper training coach, like field training, the superior officer who has been trained on how to teach, not just because he's been there longer. Yeah. That was the old school. That was the old school way of doing things. We're just going to put you with somebody who's been here 10 years. Yeah. But they don't know how to do what they don't know how to teach. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that could be very detrimental in some new officer's training.
Yeah. So the thing that interests me about this is, obviously, I know very little about, you know, American politics, in the sense of, I do know that, you know, each state does have its own laws to an extent. It does have its own training. You mentioned, you know, obviously your experience in New Jersey. Do you know anything about kind of Minneapolis and the training they go through? Have you had any interactions with the police force over there of, you know, background checks they do of, you know, when someone's entering the police force? I know they do physical tests, as you're saying, you know, they do interview training, but is there any kind of psychological tests? Is there, you know, putting them under a severe amount of pressure, seeing how they react, that kind of thing?
I don't know anything. Nothing specifically about that state. Yeah. I know New Jersey is very stringent. There is no such thing as an over-vigilant background check. Yeah. For a new hire, you know, there is a psychological evaluation that's incorporated with that, and there's also, when somebody is already on the job and working, you know, you are entrusting people to do a job that split decisions need to be made. And let's not forget that these people are actually humans.
Yeah.
They, you know, yeah, I'll give you an example. One of my favorite stories to tell somebody who's never done this job, and when I speak to youth that are interested in the career in law enforcement, if you have to go to someone's house because you think there's a dead body in there and it's been there for a couple days, which is not the most uncommon things. You know, most of the time it's just an older person who has passed away and you're going to check on them because they haven't heard. If you carry in your patrol bag Vicks vapor rub, the stuff you put on your chest when you have a cold, and it's got eucalyptus smell and it clears your sinuses, it helps you sleep. Well, you keep that in your patrol bag and you stick it up your nose, so when you go in there, if there's a dead body, you don't smell it as much.
Jeez.
Okay? If you don't have any of that with you, what you do is you go to the car, you open the gas cap, you stick your fingers in the gas cap, and you rub gasoline on your face to distract the smell.
Yeah.
Okay? That's a normal day at work. That is not out of the ordinary. Afterwards, you wash your face and you go to lunch, and then you go home and you'll be a father and a husband and a little league coach and a coach, a youth group or things like that. That's a Tuesday. That is a normal day.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the public forgets that behind the uniform is an actual person.
Yeah.
There. You know, a person.
Job.
Yeah. So you have to take that in consideration. So what I was making of that point was that even throughout the officer's career, they need to be monitored.
Yeah.
Their mental health, their physical health. So you don't end up with an episode where an officer completely loses it. Although for the last 4 years, no one's paid attention that he's having all kinds of personal problems, work-related problems, and things like that. I know New Jersey in their internal affairs guidelines, specifically have things in there where you can mandate an officer speak to somebody and things like that. As far as Minnesota, I don't know. I have in my career, through training in other states, seen a huge fluctuation in training and hiring processes. New Jersey being on the more stringent side, that I've seen other states that it might be a bit less.
Yeah,
there is no standard. There's no standard nationwide.
Yeah, you mentioned that, obviously there is a person behind the job title, and as you say, with that story of kind of it being a regular Tuesday, that you kind of block the smell to go into dead bodies, and, starting out in the police force for yourself, was that something you kind of comprehended before you went in, or was that kind of, what was your initial reason for joining the police force?
I was in the right place at the right time. I came out when I was 19 and started as a police dispatcher, answering the emergency phone calls and things like that. If you had asked me the week before what I was going to do with my life, I had no idea. It was just a calling, and I ran into an old baseball coach who happened to work for the police department. He asked me what I was doing, and he said there was an opening on the desk, part-time opening because somebody was out sick. That night, I went in for training. Within the first hour, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I'm so grateful for that, because I know many people just do not know what their purpose on this planet is.
Yeah.
I walked out of there at the age of 19, got in my car, and I'd like to say I never worked a day in my life after that, because I really loved my job from that moment. It was exciting.
What in particular was it that you enjoyed about your job? Was it the helping people? Was it feeling that your life had worth? What was it?
My calling in life is public service, whether I knew it or not. But even before I was on the police department, I was always enjoyed helping people. How can I be a help? And law enforcement gave me a platform to do that. It increased my self-confidence, because I was pushed at the time. I had to go to a police academy, and although that wasn't extremely difficult, but I had to play by their rules. I had to pass certain tests. So when you graduate, I was rather proud of myself from where I came from, because my life before that, I was a friend to all, got around, I wasn't very popular. And then within a very short amount of time, I felt like I was a superhero. And I had the backing of the entire state of New Jersey that says, go out there and catch bad guys and help people.
Do you think obviously for you as like your motivation was to help people, and you mentioned you do get that feeling of being a superhero and having a bit more power. Do you think in the wrong hands that's what leads to these instances? You know, when people go into it and then they experience that superpower like glow, but they're not very good people, and you know they take advantage of that power of the badge.
Absolutely, yes, I absolutely agree with you. That's why selection process is so important, because you could end up with that, and not only in police, but you see that in corporate business, you see that in politics. It happens. You know, having a large amount of responsibility carries a lot of weight with it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's often that I've heard throughout my career where a police officer says, you know, well, we're being treated differently. Well, we should be.
Yeah.
You know, if I was, you know, and I know locally here, if a police officer has a personal issue, let's say an arrest for driving while intoxicated or something, you know, they'll make a big deal about it. And,
Yeah.
you know, people, well, if he was an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter, he wouldn't even be in the newspaper. Well, he's not.
Yeah.
He has taken an oath to uphold things. So he is held at a different level.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, and you know, you signed up for that.
Yeah.
You were not drafted. So, and matter of fact, not only did you sign up for it, you worked hard for it. And people are going to look at you differently. You know, when I was, you know, where I work and where I live is about 9 miles apart, but the food shopping and the Walmart and other places are in between there. And I had a code with my family that, you know, if I say something, you walk away. If I'm dealing with, because I've had people come up to me that I've had police, you know, it's not like I can completely leave my job just because I'm food shopping.
Yeah.
And they would know to meet me in the car, leave the
Yeah.
shopping cart and meet me in the car, because I'm going to have to deal with this person here because they're not happy of our last time. You know, that is, fortunately, that only happened very, very few times. If anything, I've had the opposite response where people came up and thanked me, and my wife would say, "Who was that?" I said, "I arrested them." But you know, that would happen way more. And to me, it was all about my attitude. One of my greatest compliments I ever got from people is they would say, "You don't act like a cop."
Yeah.
And I know what they meant by that. You know, they were basically, you're not a jerk. I know that was their way of saying it, because
Yeah.
I always felt, first of all, you never dealt with anybody who was having a good day. Never.
No.
Nobody called you because they're having a good day. Matter of fact, you're probably meeting people who are having the worst day of their life. Even if you stop them for exceeding the speed limit, you just seem to be like the peak of a horrible day. You know, their dog died. You know, it was just a bad day, and now they run into you. And you know, I always took that into consideration when I was dealing with somebody, that they're having, you know, and most of the time they're not bad people. They just made a mistake, or they're doing something wrong. Now, I have run into outright evil people, but most of the time it was just people doing dumb things, making poor decisions, and they just needed, you know, to whether some people it was just a verbal, just hey, don't do that again type thing, and other people unfortunately had to be arrested and you know, go through the court system for that. But you know, that was always my philosophies. If you treat people decently, then they will be decent back. You know, I understand what you have to do, and especially if they're already in my custody, handcuffs on, brought to the police station. I'm just doing paperwork at this point. You know, and if you want to act out and scream and yell, and you know, you're not really helping things. If anything, the more cooperative you are with me, the faster we're going to get you out of here.
Yeah.
You know, and especially for something that would be serious, I could say, hey, you know, I'm going to be calling a judge, and he's either going to set bail, meaning you're going to have to come up with money or sit in the county jail, or he's going to ask, if you're very cooperative and you say you're going to come into court, I'll just hand you a piece of paper and you show up back. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm going home later.
Yeah.
It's you know, so, and I would encourage good behavior by anybody I dealt with. And that, you know, even to go back to what we were talking about before with the use of power and stuff, I know what power I had. And I also know what I'm confident in doing. And that's, you know, talk about physical fitness and being able to train through altercations. You know, a confident officer rarely has to lay hands on somebody. Some people you're going to fight with. There's no getting around that. Yet I've had more times where people would just comply because I say, look, I'm not going to give you a hard time. You know, let me just do what I have to do, and we'll get you out here as fast as possible.
I think if there was more officers like you, Jan, the world would be a much better place. And this is the reason why I wanted to speak to you, because I feel like, you know, ever since I met you, you did change my perception. I never had anything really against the police, but, you know, when I met you, and I did think, you know, that guy does deserve to have, you know, the responsibility of people. I trust that guy with the safety of people because, you know, by the way you talk about your job, the passion, you know, your overall desire to help people is exactly what people in that position should have, and they should be strong characters. And as you say, you know, people do look at you differently when you're a police officer, and so they should. You have more power than, you know, working in a shop, although at the moment that's a very important job, or it's a regular life. You know, you mentioned being in the shop and you had a role with your family. If anyone did come up to you, they know, just wait in the car. Did you ever have a worrying situation where you were thinking, right, it's really going to go down here, I might have to, you know, strain this person, I might have to fight him, he might have a gun on him?
I had one time where it was just getting very loud, and I just walked away. Which to me also was an excellent insult to that person, because like I don't even have. I used to say, you know, I get paid to fight people. I'm not getting paid right now.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. And it was just like, okay, you know, of course you don't forget something like that. You know, not to hold a grudge, but it's just like I'm not going to get involved in an incident when I'm not working.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's not personal.
Yeah.
The person is yelling. That person is upset for what I represent or the uniform I put on when I was at work. They don't even know me. They don't even know me.
Yeah.
You know? And to go back to what you were saying, and thank you very much for the compliments, I was taught those things through excellent mentorship.
Yeah.
When I came on, the sergeants and the people that were training me were my father's age at the time.
Yeah.
And that's how I was treated. You know, you listen to me because I'm very much your father type here. And that's what they instilled in me. Honestly, when I came out of the police academy, I was very rambunctious. I was going to save the world. And maybe my head was, you know, I was a bit inflated with my ego. They fixed that real quick. My mentors, they, you know, because they fixed it by outright telling me, do you notice why everybody's giving you a hard time? It's because you're acting like an idiot. You don't need to prove to them that you're in charge. Matter of fact, they know that you're not sure if you're in charge because of the way you're acting.
Yeah.
You're in charge. You don't have to raise your voice. You know, you will use force when necessary just to control the situation, but you don't need to prove to anybody how tough you are.
Yeah.
And that's what and I was fortunate that I had, you know, and it comes down to what is our job? Help people. That's it. Help people. And I was very fortunate to have people fix that real early in my career. And I'm lucky that when I had younger officers, or when I had the opportunity when I would teach at the police academy, is if you have that confidence within you, and what builds that confidence is good training. And what I mean by good training is training that involves getting knocked on your ass. You know, I have a philosophy for training. If you haven't been punched in the face in a while, look into it in training.
Yeah.
Because it humbles you a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what you need. Because you know, especially if you're talking and you don't have it behind you. And you know, and anybody who ever has criticized, you know, police use of force and things like that, which I'll listen to anybody's, you know, opinion on things. You know, and my usual response is, when was the last time you were in a physical altercation? If they don't have ever had one, whether it's through, you know, martial arts or boxing or a street fight, I don't care. If you have not, you don't get a vote.
Yeah.
Because I did it.
Your emotions do change, don't they? You know, I train in kickboxing, and I've had a few things, and you know, it is that thing of you see people change from the first session. Obviously, your job's a completely different level, but you do see people change from the first time they get hit, or the first time they're in a difficult situation, how they react. Till over time, you know, the better people will, you know, find comfort in it and find, right, how do I control my emotions here? And I think that is part of being the superhero, of being the police officer. You do need to have that ability to go, right, I've got a lot of power here. And as you say, you don't need to shout, you don't need to enforce it when it's not needed, but you need to carry yourself with that energy, and then people pick up on that, and you have better relationships. As you say, you're coming in when people are having the worst days ever. Which brings me on to a good question. I was speaking to a friend of mine who was, really looking forward to hearing your opinion on this. I told him a bit about you and my experience of you, and he was fascinated to hear kind of your opinions. And the question he gave me was, he wanted to know, what was your best day as being a police officer, and what was your worst day?
I don't know. I would say my best day was probably my first day, when I realized that, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing and things like that. I was very fortunate. I caught a lot of bad guys. I sent some bad guys, some serious bad guys to jail for a long time. And in this particular case I was speaking of is these young men broke into a woman's apartment, sexually assaulted her. They tried to kill her, and within 12, 15 hours, we had caught them. It was no big whodunit. She already knew who they were. That case really, stuck in my mind, because I was interviewing a woman who was about my mother's age in a hospital setting, who had been sexually assaulted.
Wow.
So that was a high profile. I also had another high profile case with a child abduction case that went for 8 months, and I ended up flying outside of Houston, Texas, to pick up the child there. As far as the criminal cases going, those are the two that really, jumped out and made me feel, that I was definitely catching bad guys. On the other side of that is we had a youth program, a junior police academy, that myself and another officer started, that was probably more influential than anything I did my entire career. The elementary school kids were part of this program. It built leadership and character and, teamwork and things like that, based on some police philosophies, and they got to do some cool police stuff.
Yeah.
That one I got more satisfaction out of than anything else I did my entire career. The 10 years that we did that program, and interesting enough, that there's some of the people that were in the earlier programs when we first started to get on a law enforcement career.
Wow.
And that wasn't even the purpose of the program. We weren't making little police officers, yet they found that that was their calling, and something lit up in them that they were interested in doing it. So, as far as my worst day, because I've had there may have been some times where I just felt exhausted just trying to do so much. Unfortunately, I had to get to the fact that you can't save everybody.
Yeah.
As much as you want to, or sometimes politics gets in the way, which unfortunately we're seeing a bit of that now.
Yeah.
Especially when I was at the role of chief. And I really can't complain about the people that I worked for. They're just trying to do the best they can. But politics and police never mix.
No.
Never mix. There's two completely separate things that should not intermingle. But I had a great career. I've run into other people who are still complaining. They've been retired for 10 or 15 years, and they're still complaining about the place. I have nothing bad to say. I just my police career and our course we expired. That was it. I was at the top of the game, and didn't feel I was much more. There was much more of a challenge.
Yeah.
So I left and became a yoga teacher.
We'll talk a bit about that, because that's an interesting one. I know you train a lot of MMA fighters at Jim Miller's gym, and I remember when you were over visiting. And I was. So, how's the environment? Obviously, have you had conversations with MMA fighters? 'Cause obviously, they're going into a different kind of dangerous environment where they're fighting. Where they win, they earn a certain amount, and they get a better opportunity next. And if they lose, they could possibly break a limb, they could get brain damage. And, it's a similar kind of mindset that you must go into going into a police altercation. Have you had those conversations with the MMA fighters?
The fighters, as far as comparing that to, street fighting and things like that, are different. They have rules. The police have rules too, but I always say we're allowed to cheat. Like, I'm not going to go fight one person. I'm going to bring 5 people with me. That's always our thing, and that's the way the law is kind of written, is, we're allowed to cheat. we don't go to a fair fight.
Yeah.
That's so there is a bit of a difference between that and a UFC fight and MMA stuff. When I teach at Miller's Yoga, they are the overall easily one of my favorite groups to teach yoga to. For the simple reason is they are humble.
Yeah.
They, you don't shoot your mouth off. You prove it on the mat.
Yeah.
They are the most humble. And I give a great example is, back to several months ago, or maybe even last year, one of the people in my class, Tyler, went to his fight and lost. And he put a Facebook post up congratulating the person that beat him.
Yeah.
And I read that, and when I saw him in class the next week or so, I said, that was the nicest thing. I said, that's amazing. And he looked at me and kind of smiled and said, but the guy beat me. Why wouldn't I congratulate him? Yeah. He was better than me. That's it. No excuses. He did to me what I was trying to do to him. And maybe if we fought again today, maybe I would win. He might have just been faster at but I so enjoyed the humility of those people that participate in that, because first of all, there's no getting around it. You're on the mat, either you win or you lose. There's no getting around that.
Yeah.
And also because particularly like jiu-jitsu is a thinking person's game. I've gotten mopped up and down the mat by people I know I'm stronger than, but they have technique. It's a thinking person's game. But what really gets me is they know when they're weak at something, and they'll come to me and say, hey, can you help me with flexibility in this area? Or I do a bit about mindset. When you're getting your face ground into the mat, now's not the time to panic. It's the time to collect yourself and say, okay, I don't like what's happening right now, but it's not, I'm not losing yet, but I don't like the direction this is going. Now I need to calm down, whether it's through breathing or just a simple mindset of, okay, I've been in this position before, which is so much similar to police training that I do. Is particularly in firearms training, is once you're, okay, you're good at shooting paper targets that are standing still in front of you, which is fantastic if you're training to go to a duel. But outside of that, now we're going to ramp things up. Low light, moving. It's called stress inoculation. It's a little bit of giving yourself a little bit of stress each time, so that it's not the first time that you've ever functioned under these situations.
Yeah, it's a similar feeling. You feel like you've been there before.
I've been there before. As Mike Tyson says, we all got a plan until we get punched in the face.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes of all time, I have to say.
And that's true about life.
Yeah.
You can go to the driving range. I'm sure you hit the ball perfect there because the conditions are perfect.
Yeah.
You're just standing, right? But yet when you're on a course and if you're competing and now you have the stress of competition and there's people standing around staring at you and the terrain has changed. And how do you get better at doing that? Well, you put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
Repeatedly. And you set yourself up for success. Not that there's anything wrong with failure. I'm a big fan of failure.
Yeah.
It's because that's how you learn. The latest thing I've been doing is a lot of rock climbing, indoor rock climbing, and now that the weather's nice, I'll be outdoor. And on any given time that I go to the rock climbing gym, if I'm working on a certain project, a certain thing that I'm trying to climb that's pushing my limits, I will spend about an hour and a half there, 2 hours there. Most of the time, I'm just mentally trying to figure it out because I'm only on the wall for about a minute or two. I will probably get it once out of 10 times.
Yeah.
My failure rate is 90%. But if I do get it once, then I got it once. I will make sure I just didn't get it once by accident.
Yeah.
I'm going to try now. And that's how I improve. But most of the time when I'm there, I am failing at what I'm working on because I set the bar high.
I think the important thing is that, as you mentioned with humility before the MMA fight, is that a lot of people perceive failure as, reassurance that all the negative thoughts they've been having about themselves are right. I'm a failure. I'm not good at this. They tell themselves these stories, whereas, what you taught me a lot about when I seen you last year and you came over, I remember talking to you a lot about kind of mindset, and you really set me on the journey of really delving into how I'm thinking about things, how I perceive failure against success and so on. And it is important when things don't work out for you, you look at it objectively. You don't define yourself by it. You say, right, what could I have done better there? And then next time you're out there, you make an effort to make those things better. You monitor it, and you build self-respect that way. You build self-motivation to turn up the next day. And that mindset will carry you through any situation. Whereas the people that always ask, why is it always me? Why is this happening? The victim mindset, no matter what the situation is, nothing's going to come good of that. And
you are not a failure. You had unwanted results.
yeah,
that's all it is. Unwanted results.
yeah,
and what can you learn from it? When I saw you last time, I mentioned that my cousin and I currently hold the record for running the Appalachian Trail in the state of New Jersey. 73.2 miles. We did it in 33 hours, 15 minutes or something. That was my third attempt at doing it. And his and I, second attempt. Last time we came up 9 miles short. And we quit for no other, and there's nothing glamorous about it. But we did not fail. Because when we debriefed and recapped it, we said, we can make improvements to this project. Simple things like, let's go the first time we did it when the weather was actually a little too hot and there was a shortage of water, because we're filtering water along the way. You're not carrying water for 33 hours. So we moved it to a different time of the year. There was just about 7 small things that we had to do. So it was a learning experience. That's all it was. We didn't fail the first time. We just had results. Then, okay, we have to, try again.
Yeah.
And it was probably better that we did it the second time, went so much smoother. And when we completed it, we learned we had to do it the first time. We had to learn from where what worked and what didn't work. That's all it is. And I encourage people that all the time. I say, fail big. Fall on your face, and fail public too. Fall on your face, just.
I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. I mean, I've, rock climbing, I've tried, routes that I knew were out of my area.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, so I come off, I tell people I don't even fall off the wall. I just come off the wall. That's all. I came off. So it's perceptive. How do you visualize, or not, how do you receive information that's coming in? I never have when I'm shooting, I don't even use the language of, if I'm teaching somebody, we never miss what we're shooting at. The shot didn't go, I just changed the phrasing. I just said the shot didn't go where we wanted it to. And if you know why it didn't go, perfect. That's perfect. It's the same thing when you're hitting a golf ball. If you hit a ball and it just shanks off in some wacky, but if you know why you did it, that's okay.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with my friend. I was helping him out with his swing, and he was saying, he's really getting down on himself because he's not hitting it well. And he was like, "Do you ever feel like that?" And I said, if you're asking me if I ever play bad, yeah, I play bad, but do I ever not enjoy it, or do I ever get down on myself? It's been a long time since I got down on myself with golf, because of how obsessed I am with it and how much I read about it. It's all objective to me. As you're saying, if I hit a bad shot, I've hit enough of them to know why. I can literally, if there was a camera behind me, I can tell you what just happened on the camera, about the feeling. And, this is what people need to understand. If you want to get better at something, you need to learn about, and you need to understand it to an extent that you can look at it objectively, and you don't just go, "Oh, this isn't for me," and quit, and then define yourself as a quitter. And then everything you come up against in life, you have that in your head, "Oh, I'm the guy that quits. Whenever it gets hard, I better not get hard here, because, me, I quit." And I know I mentioned before, I was kind of coming on that mindset, but having the conversations with you really helped me to decide, right, this is what I'm going to really concentrate on, developing my mindset. Was there anyone, you mentioned in the police force, they kind of humbled you? Who first kind of made you aware of your own mind, or, that positive thinking is so much better than negative thinking, to sum it up?
I was very fortunate. In 2002, I participated in a program called the Navy SEAL Adventure Challenge. It was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, United States. I kind of signed up for it on a whim. I had an idea what it was, and it's basically a very brief 24-hour example of Navy SEAL budge training. And it's run by a man, Don Mann, who I've become friends with. That was a life-changing event. Now, up to that point, I had run marathons, triathlons, adventure racing, multi-day races. I knew I was, I'm physically fit. I do good. That event changed me because I was pushed physically so much harder. I mean, to the point of serious uncomfortableness, particularly being in a swimming pool. I thought somebody was going to drown, and it might be me. It was just the first time in my life I actually thought about quitting something briefly. Like, I have made a horrible mistake. I got to get out of here within the first 3 hours. Unfortunately, I didn't quit. I just kept saying to myself, just hang in there a little longer, hang in there a little longer. What I learned from that program was how much of a more of a beating I can take. Also being, yeah, and not to say I'm not no badass, but definitely I can take a beating, and I can do more than I ever thought I could do.
Yeah.
And I was also in the company of true professionals, and I wanted to be more of a professional like that. People who get the job done, don't need to brag about anything. And, I can say my friend Don now, when we're with groups of people, he is very reluctant to tell stories that put him in a good light. You have to pull stories out of him.
Wow.
Because he's just a humble person. And that event was so life-changing that 2 years later, I went with my oldest son, Alex, who was still in high school at the time. And I know it changed him. For the same reasons, being around people like that who are just absolute professionals in their field, and to be pushed. And at the time, he was a cross-country runner and very good at it. And he came back a completely different person. And interestingly, within a year of completing that program, I was fortunate to be selected to go to a leadership program, West Point Command and Leadership, which is based on our United States West Point Military Academy leadership. This is all academic stuff. Sitting in a classroom, wearing a suit, 6 months long, master's level college, which I have not, zero college. I went from high school to the police department. And I sat at the orientation listening to reports that had to be written, handwritten tests that take 4 hours, where you have to handwrite your answer of leadership theories and things like that. And my immediate thought was, wow, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And then the voice in my head said, you can do hard things. It's not impossible. It's just hard.
Yeah.
And you can do hard things. You may need help from other people to get you through this, which is nothing wrong with asking for help or guidance, or especially if you don't understand something. Yeah. But it was, I learned through my body at the SEAL Team program that you can do way more than you ever think you can. And I thought I was pretty good at doing that, because I had pushed myself. And now I realize that, there's so much more up in here than your physical body. If you have that confidence in there through, little victories here and there, and also to really push yourself. And then soon thereafter that, I got into yoga teacher training, which really opened my mind to more of the positive mentality of it. If you think you can and you think you can't, you're right. And I started to also get involved into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically how to speak to somebody. I have a very high success rate with police academy recruits. You can actually fail the police academy for failing the firearms portion. You don't have enough holes in the target. It's simple as that. And I found a niche training, police academy, that will come to me before they, like a prep course, before they get to. Or unfortunately, I'll get some that will call after they've already failed once and they're going to have to go back for a retest. And I have about a 98% success rate with them.
Wow.
And it all has to do, because I interview them after, I will meet with them for 2 hours. They will go the next day and pass the course. And afterwards, when they call me and they're all excited and they pass the course, I will interview them because I want to know what's working. I want to know what I'm doing is working and what's not working. And I will ask them, what did I do? Because basically, I'm not doing, same thing with teaching in golf. I mean, you just give them the same, this is what you need to do to make the ball go straight. Well, this is what you need to do to make the ball go straight where you want. They're very similar with golf. I would say, well, what did I do that the other instructors? And they said, you overwhelmed us with confidence. You convinced us that we are going to pass. And I purposely do that. I even very off the cuff, nonchalantly, when I first meet with them and we're just having conversation, we're not even touching guys. I'm just talking to them. I overwhelm them even by using past phrases, like after you pass the course and when you get out of the police academy, and if you're ever going to be an instructor. And they came from a mindset of not even knowing if they're going to pass the minimum requirement. Now they're sitting talking to me, who's got you've already passed, as far as I'm concerned. I just got to show you how to do it. The shooting is very simple. if you know how to do it properly, especially, you know, the minimum course of fire which they need to shoot. I'm sure you can teach me to hit a golf ball straight in a relatively short amount of time. I'm not ready for the PGA Tour, but to get the minimum to hit the ball generally where you want it to go.
Yeah.
And what I found, particularly in firearms training, and I guarantee this is exactly the same way with golf, is you can have people that are very good at it but can't teach it. It's a completely different skill. And that's where I spent decades studying how to be a good teacher, which also reflects back on, you know, with myself. And I would say this to the magic question I so enjoy asking myself, or anybody who has something that's not going, whether it's their life situations. I often get questions about, you know, changing lifestyle. Mostly it's how to lose weight and how to stop smoking. But in the firearms world, it's, you know, if the bullet doesn't go where we want it to, I said, we're going to stop. And I'm going to ask you a simple question. Why?
Yeah.
Why did it go that way? Or if somebody says to me, and where I was talking about, you know, I can't seem to stay on a diet. I don't even care what the diet they're doing. I'll just ask why.
Yeah.
You know, that's my advice to people all the time. And I ask myself all the time, if something's working well for me, if I had a really good day, at the end of the day before I go to sleep, I go, wow, I had a really good day. Why?
Yeah.
What did I do right? And as humans, we tend to always pick out, well, I know, you know, I had a bad day because this happened, this happened, this happened. Well, if you have a good day, you ever ask yourself that question? I had a great day. How come? Because I want to do it again. I want to repeat that, either that behavior or whatever I did that made it a great day. And then also, if things didn't go the way they were planned, well, what did I do?
Yeah.
You know, 100% ownership of my day. Outside of weather, I control pretty much everything.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You know, I remember we spoke about Jocko Willink
Yes.
a little bit, and I think you've met him, haven't you? Well,
yes, I did. Yeah, at a book signing.
Yeah, I read his book, Extreme Ownership, and I also read, I don't know if you've heard of him, Ant Middleton. He's a guy from the United Kingdom. He's an SAS soldier.
I picked up his book when I left you and at the airport in London. I was looking for something to read on the plane, and I picked up his book. And I've been watching his show, SAS, Who Dares Wins.
Yeah. But, you know, from reading, although I want to go into sport, I feel like the strongest minds on the planet are, you know, people that put themselves in the hardest situations, because at the end of the day, they find a way to deal with those situations. And it kind of puts in a perspective for me. I'm just going out there hitting a golf ball at the end of the day. You know, I may win, I may lose. You know, it could progress my career, it could. But whatever happens, you know, that is what I'm doing. And, you know, Jocko Willink speaks about extreme ownership, that he'd go into a situation, and if someone would say to him, do you need anything? He'd try his very best to say no all the time. So when he did need something, you know, people got that urgency of, right, you know, Jocko really needs something here. And he wouldn't need to raise his voice. He wouldn't need to, you know, put any more emphasis on it than just regular talking. I need this. And people would be like, wow, this needs to get done right now. And, you know, putting yourselves in the difficult situations. I know how many things you do, from your ultra marathons to your rock climbing, obviously serving in the police, you know, doing yoga, which if you haven't done yoga, it's really hard. I remember you ran me through a couple of yoga sessions when you were here, and I couldn't believe, you know, how strenuous it is, and it's a proper workout. Do you find
yoga is jiu-jitsu with yourself?
Yeah. Do you find that the more things that you do, you crave more of that feeling? You crave being intimidated or scared a bit more, just because overcoming it feels so good?
Yeah, it's just a part of who I am. I enjoy a challenge. I would say, in hindsight, if I lived now, I would, as a child, especially, I would probably have been offered medication. I like to say when I'm talking to a group, I'll say something like, I have this thing called ADH something. And of course, everybody perks up and raises. I said, I have ADHD in high definition. I just found a career that it worked great with. It was constant stimulation, constant change, if you wanted it to be. Even if there was nothing to do, I can go find something to do when I was a patrol officer. So that worked well with that. I did have a bit of an issue when I left the police, because where am I going to get that from now?
Yeah.
I don't have that excitement of the job. Yoga was very good with that, even though people would say it's boring or it's slow down. I had an excellent yoga teacher to show that it was more than just bending at the waist. Yoga is more than just flexibility. It has nothing, to me, it has almost nothing to do with flexibility. That's the physical part of it. But yet I'm still constantly looking for, where can I challenge myself? Lately, I've been looking for more things that are not just physical. Last month I ran 30 miles on the Appalachian Trail on a whim. Just spent the whole day, went out there and said, let me see if I can run 30 miles in one day. I haven't done it in a while. The last 2 miles were a little tough because I hadn't run more than 5 or 6 miles in a long time. But I knew I can do it because it's here. My body will get along going there. I'd say my new passion now at rock climbing, I find it so intriguing because I will go to the rock climbing gym, and the average person that's there during the daytime when I'm there are in their 20s. I am way stronger than all of them. I can do way more pull-ups. I can move more weight than them. I can run faster than them. I can run farther than them. And yet on the rock climbing wall, they beat me every time. Yeah. And I said, there's something to this because it's not about brute strength. And frankly, life isn't about brute strength either. You can't smash your way through everything. The little I know of golf is the more harder I try and hit that ball, that worse it goes. Yeah. it's finesse.
It's technique.
And I've seen that with the rock climbing, absolutely, because it's finesse. It's how to move your body. And this is what I'm learning from them. When I would go to the rock climbing gym at first, my wife said, what do you do there for 2 hours? She's thinking, it's like a gym. You exercise. I said, no, most of the time I'm staring at the wall, moving my hands like this, looking up and trying to figure out where I'm going to put them so I can follow a certain route. To me, it's like yoga. It's like yoga vertically and going this way. And it's a thinking person's game to do this. How am I going to, there's times where I get stuck and I'm thinking too long and all of a sudden I'm starting to lose my grip and I'm actually getting physically exhausted. So that's, my latest, passion of challenge, because sometimes it just seems so simple. All I have to do is get up this thing, but the holds are getting smaller because I'm getting higher up on the grading of climbing. And then there's always that weird feeling too that you think you're going to fall when you're off, 60 feet in the air. And I feel like I'm holding on by my eyelashes sometimes, but it's what makes my personality is even my current job is I'm a school security officer, even though school was closed here in the United States and in New Jersey. But when that was it's I find the excitement of working with, particularly at the high school level, of being a mentor to them and inspiring them to show them, what is possible. So, and every day is different there at the school. So it's, that part is my latest, professional, what I'm doing there. And there's nothing better than when I get a call from somebody who's in the police academy who's like, they're watching their entire career going down because they can't put holes in a target where they're supposed to. And they're getting very frustrated. And I find that so rewarding because I know the next day they're going to call me all excited saying, I passed. And I said, I know you would. I know you can do this. We just have to convince you can do this. So and mostly it's because of the way I speak to them. Yeah. I'm using different words to explain things. Teaching somebody to me is very simple. You're taking the unknown, making it known in a language that the student understands. Well, if I'm dealing with, a 25-year-old athletic male, I can talk that language.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because if they come in and they appear athletic and they're CrossFit people, that's a tough bunch. Yeah. Because they're used to, well, in CrossFit, if you physically work hard, that fixes the issue that you're working on. If I say go pick up something and it weighs 30 pounds, they pick up something that weighs 30 pounds. If I say go pick up something that weighs 60 pounds, their brain works very simply. Use twice as much energy. Very simple concept. Doesn't work that way in firearms. And it doesn't work that way in yoga, and it definitely doesn't work that way in rock climbing. Yeah. And it doesn't work that way in life. As I said, bashing your head into things, brute force only gets you so far. Yeah. Work smarter, not harder. And where that really came into my police career also was in interview and interrogation. Fortunately, we live in a country where you cannot beat a confession out of somebody. So I'm going to have a sit down, and I'm going to convince you to tell me the truth through nothing more than just our conversation.
Yeah.
And in the United States, we have the Miranda, which means you don't even have to participate in the conversation. And then if you do decide, you may ask for an attorney, and all that stuff you see on Law and Order. That is true. So you have to voluntarily want to speak to me and talk to me. And I found that fascinating, because I had a very high level of people that were willing to confess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Sorry, Jan. 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were saying about doing the interrogation, and you can't beat out of them, so you won't be able to use brute strength. You'd have to kind of finesse it in the same way, with doing any
right.
different.
And frankly, that doesn't work anyway. You beat somebody, they're going to tell you whatever they want to hear anyway, just for you to stop doing that to them. As I say, unfortunately, I live in a country here where people have the right to remain silent. That the stuff you see on Law and Order, that is true. You do not have to speak to the police, and if you do choose, you may have an attorney present. If you can afford one, they'll give you one. But that whole thing, I found that fascinating, because to me it was like a chess game of the mind, and it was a part of my career where I was moving from going to fights at bars and more of a physical thing to more of an intellectual conversation. And again, I had good mentorship and good training in that, where to me it was like, okay, it's time to sit down for a mental chess game. How am I going to get to this? I want this person, especially if I knew that they did commit whatever we were talking about. And some of it was serious sexual assaults involving children, and right down to minor things also. But a lot of it was very serious conversations. And they're going to voluntarily tell me the truth. And I found that fascinating, and not realizing how it was rolling into other things in my own life of, using neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and because that, and how to speak to somebody, and go back to our, much earlier conversations about using type of force. In New Jersey use of force guidelines, your mere presence as a police officer, particularly in a uniform, is a use of force. It is the lowest level of use of force. And honestly, most people will respect it and comply with it because they know what you represent. But just standing there in a police uniform is a use of force, and you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah.
And even when we were talking earlier about use of force issues with police, in New Jersey, if you do use of force, you have to, the officer has to complete a separate form. It's a state form. It's a fill in the blank. Use of force, name, what type of force you use. It's a very simple form. And I would look at my use of force forms on a weekly, monthly, yearly, because I was, as I mentioned earlier, looking for patterns. And it was interesting. I mean, just because somebody fills out a use of force report, it could be 100% justified. Unfortunately, that does happen, where you have to use force to get someone to comply, particularly if they're under arrest and they're resisting arrest. But what I found that was interesting is my officers who were out of shape, maybe a little sloppy in their appearance, just in their appearance, and then you combine that with their appearance and their demeanor was maybe not as confident. And these are veteran officers at higher levels of use of force. Yeah. Because the person that they were dealing with didn't respect them because they looked like a slob. Yeah. They acted that way. They reeked of insecurity. So, I used to say Joe Bad Guy would look at him and say, "I'm not listening to you."
Yeah. That makes sense. Makes sense.
Right. And it's interesting because I could have a new police officer who has minimal experience. Maybe he doesn't even have a clue what he's doing when he's standing on scene, but he looks well together. He's carrying himself with confidence. Not have a problem at all. Yeah. Because the perception from the public was, well, he looks like he knows what he's doing. He's carrying himself that way. And it could be a simple thing as, head up, shoulders back, walking confidently. And I've taught that to young recruits. Fake it to you. If you're not sure what you're doing, just make sure you're the only person who knows that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Act as if. Yeah. And this, wait for somebody else to come to get specific information on what you need to be doing. But if you show up on scene and walk with confidence, people will listen to you. Just don't let them know you don't know what you're doing. Wait until everybody else gets there.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for almost everything that you do. If you act in confidence, and I saw that with my failing police recruits in the firearms thing, that they had the whole perfect sign, head down, shoulders slumped. They were just lacking of confidence. And my simple thing was I would literally put my finger and lift their head up.
Yeah.
Just stand tall, be proud. This is gonna go very well. They don't believe it yet.
And that sounds like almost like fantasy talk to a lot of people. Me and you know it. Well, you've known it for a lot longer than me, but I'm sure of it now. Of like how the domino effect, like you say, standing tall, chin up, carrying yourself, talking with confidence. Subconsciously that leads on to a whole new list of things. Same way, standing slumped, head down, talking negative, whether that be outwardly to the world or even in your own head being negative, that
Absolutely.
has a domino effect as well. And, that's a very important thing, I think, that, a lot of the world's lacking, especially at the minute of, putting the blame, these are to blame. And, the one thing that I really found a problem with, obviously with the incident with George Floyd, which is, a horrific incident, but the reaction, fair enough, people protest, Black Lives Matter, and, this needs to be cut out, but, rioting and destroying a city and destroying people's businesses and, so on and so forth was something that, and obviously my experience with you, I knew you were an officer and you're someone I respect a lot. I struggled to kind of get the premise that, all the police are the problem, all the police are racist. Is not putting every police officer into the same category, the same as putting every black person into the same category.
Right. And I think the general public understands that. And there is a difference between protest and riot.
Yeah.
And and when I don't have a problem with people protest. I mean, law enforcement is exactly that. Law enforcement. We don't write the laws, we enforce them.
Yeah.
And people can change what they want their police department to do. You'll see that often. During the crack epidemic of the 80s, particularly in Southern California, they wanted strict, hard policing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it may have swung completely to one side, and then from there, the word community policing came out.
Yeah.
That we want police more in the communities, and the DARE program came from that, where they had officers in schools and things like that. So it's the public that decides what they want the police to do. I have no problem with people who are peacefully protesting. That's what it was founded on, this country to begin with, under the First Amendment, that I can go in the street and publicly say I'm not happy with the way the government is working at all levels. And that's part of democracy. And if I don't like somebody, I don't have to vote for them. So I'm all for, people, with civil disobedience. Again, it'd be asking why. I remember being on patrol many years ago and running into kids and having to say, hey, you cannot skateboard in this place. Usually it was private property, and I understand why the owners don't want it because they don't want the liability. But they were like, well, there's nothing, we're not committing a crime, and the whole, skateboard, that kind of atmosphere. I said, well, go get the law changed. I'm just a guy enforcing it. Yeah. You are the public. If you don't like something, I mean, there was a time back in the 80s where the speed limit on the highways here was 55 on the interstates, and people didn't like it, and they got it changed.
Yeah.
So, we the people are the ones that can make changes. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes, a large gathering in a street. But as far as, looting and things like that, that's just a completely different group of people, which unfortunately is putting a bad look on the peaceful protesters.
Exactly. That was exactly my point, that, when protesting turns into, an opportunity for the bad guys to start rioting and, almost look like they're doing it for a good reason, it's, there's nothing beneficial that comes from smashing windows and taking things from, shops. It, in terms of society, you're only making the problem worse. You're putting gas on the fire then, aren't you? And, history's been full of instances where people retaliate to something bad. One that it's like the domino effect we were saying, one bad thing happens, and another bad thing happens, he's done something bad, I have the right to do something bad in return, rather than, you know, to stop all this, I'm going to be the bigger person. I'm going to look at this objectively and actually come to a resolution, instead of saying, you know, you do something so I can do something worse. And, you know, if the whole of society carries on like this, it's, you know, it's going to be hard to watch, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah, I always like the quote from Mother Teresa, who was asked to march against the Vietnam War. And she said, I will not march against the war, but I will march for peace.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, that's what I said to people before is, you know, you should be protesting for peace, not against something.
Yeah, because you're giving the thing power then, aren't you?
Right. And then some people say it might be semantics, so you're just changing the words. But to me, it's the attitude that goes along with it.
Yeah.
To me, words are very, you know, it's what makes me a successful firearms person. And what I do, it's the language that you use, whether you're talking to yourself or talking out in public, puts the weight to what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Frankly, this country was built on protest. You know, everything from civil rights, you know, all the way back to that Boston Tea Party. So.
Absolutely. So going into kind of your time in the police, you know, what fascinates me about police officers is, you know, obviously the day-to-day situations you're in. You know, you mentioned the Tuesday where you have to kind of gasoline or whatever you have to stop there. Was there the smell or whatever it may be? Was there ever a situation that really got to you? Was it, you know, you mentioned kind of the sexual abuse cases.
Yeah.
What ones particularly were difficult for you to deal with, or really, you know, you wanted to stamp out?
Anything to do with children. That was always, which when I first came on the police department, I was not married. I didn't have children at the time. So they were just short people on scene. I didn't even notice that they were children. It wasn't until later, when I had kids, that I realized, you know, unfortunately, we would meet children that were doomed. They didn't even know it, you know. It's just the environment that they lived in. And unfortunately, I had to interview children who were victims of sexual assault, which is, you know, when you're talking to, in my case, you know, a 5-year-old boy or girl, and you know they're telling the truth just because of the, you know, the way they're explaining the way the assault went. That was just absolutely, and you really have to control your emotions, particularly when now you've found the person, the suspect, and you have to interview them.
Yeah.
You have, you know, you can't just lose your cool and go off on this person, especially if you need a confession from them also. But it's you have to keep your emotions in check and not let yourself go. But that was the stuff I distinctly remember several times where I would finish an interview with a child, call my wife and say, pack up the kids, we're going out to dinner tonight. And she would know. She said, one of those days at work? I said, absolutely. That I just want to sit with my kids and have them be children and sit in a restaurant and watch my son Alex knock another glass of soda over on the table. You know, just and that's my least worry is we just dumped liquid onto a table. You know, as opposed to spending time with an 8-year-old who has had a full sexual experience with a family member or you know, something of that nature. That doesn't go away, you know, and knowing that you're going to have to, this child is going to live with that for going on. And maybe that also helped out when I was doing the junior police program, because we did have good influence on these kids. But I say most of the time it was hard stuff. And when you really, and I think it's an important part in law enforcement, you have to have compassion and empathy for people. When bad things happen to people, you know, it wears on you after a while. You know, when bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
You know, it's that you take home sometimes, and you're just so grateful that you don't, you know, you had the parents that you did have, you know, or I had. You know, when you're dealing with let's say a high school kid who's just a total nonconformist and, you know, a troublemaker in school, and I'm looking at the teacher going, you have no idea where this kid lives. I've been to his house. He actually lives in hell. You know, because he's not understanding algebra is the least of this kid's problem. You know, and they'll say, well, I think he's using drugs. I go, well, if you lived in his house, you'd be on drugs too. It's horrible.
I think that's the main thing people need to realize is, you know, nature against nurture, the old debate, but, you know, nurture is, I believe, you know, the majority of the equation. You know, the environment you grow up into, and you mentioned the mentors you had that taught you, you know, the way of thinking and the way to process things. And I mentioned, you know, I've been fortunate to have a lot of good people come into my lives at different stages, you know, to teach me the lessons. But, you know, if you're growing up in a house where your mum's a drug addict, your dad's a gangster, you know, you've got no windows, you know, you don't know if you're going to eat, you're not being taught how to process your emotions, you're not getting fed the right food, you know, good luck in that environment. And,
Right.
you know, you want to put the most successful person in that situation, and, you know, it'd be difficult to see them coming out on top. And I think that is the main thing the world needs to change going forward, the way we educate children, the way even things like punishment, you know, how should punishment be done? Because everybody needs discipline, but, you know, a lot of the times in school you get told off, this person's just a nightmare. Why, as you were saying, why is he a nightmare? You know, why is he...
There's a reason, right?
And there always is a reason. And, you know, education is number one, and it's not always algebra, or it's not always, you know, the history. Sometimes it's just, you know, you're going through this is a bit better way to deal with it. You know, this is how I can help you understand what you're going through at home, and that can change someone's life. It can change the momentum course of a kid's life completely.
Right. And when you talk about, particularly in the United States, about the criminal justice system regarding, you know, prison and things like that, you know, do they even rehabilitate people? Well, how do you rehabilitate somebody who's never been habilitated? They don't understand. You know, and that's what we found with our junior police program, because they had uniforms and there was inspections, and we would tell them it is your responsibility. You know, it's simple, you know, shining shoes, you know, it was like a regimented type of thing. And they had responsibilities to do that. And if they didn't, there was a mild disciplinary, it could be, you know, 5 push-ups.
Yeah.
Or maybe just for some of them, it was even to be pointed out. And a lot of them would immediately say, well, you know, would come up with an excuse. And we would say, but it's not your parents' job to make sure your uniform looks proper. You know, and we would show them how to iron it. We would show them how to shine it. We'd expect them to know nothing. So we will show you how to do it, and we will do remedial shoe shining if you need it, whatever it takes. Yet it is your responsibility. And if you choose not to, which is great because it also puts the ownership of their outcome is in their hands. It's in nobody else's hands. You know, as you were saying from Jocko's book about the ownership too. If I control as much as I can, then there's nothing out of my control. You know, if I don't put gas in my car, I'm going to run out of gas. You know, that's it. The car's not going to work anymore. And that is I can't blame anybody but myself. So with these kids, showing them the structure of you can control your life by just doing what, you know, needs to. And if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. If you forgot to shine your shoes, it may cost you 5 push-ups, you know. Yeah. It was nothing. The interesting part was it was firm, fair, and consistent discipline. And it didn't traumatize them, even if they were singled out. It didn't traumatize them. They were like, okay, now I know. Don't do that again. It wasn't the end of the world. You know, and sometimes I would see, you know, some of the teachers at the school, they're like, wow, you guys are kind of harsh on them. No, we're not. You know, we're just, you know, there's a time to hold their hand, there's a time to squeeze their hand. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and we raised their expectations of what they were expected to do. And they all conform to it.
Yeah.
You know, that's all we did is, you know, we would have, you know, some kind of relay race. You come in first place or you lost.
Yeah.
Work harder. That's it. Work harder. Maybe you lack teamwork with your team because you were all, you know, not working well together. So somebody take control and work together as a team.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated. And, you know, so to, you know, be the opposite of the horrible things and the bad things. It was very fortunate with that program, particularly with children, that we were able to instill some things in them that I hope helped them in their life when they, you know, went to high school or went to, you know, whatever their endeavors were on there. You know, just to be able to do that was extremely rewarding. The fact that some of them actually became police officers is even better, but that wasn't even the purpose. But that's, my career was wonderful. Even the bad times when the phone rang at 3 o'clock in the morning and I had to go in because it was, you're getting ordered in. There's no arguing with that. But not for nothing. I didn't do it for free. I got paid. And there were times where I just, particularly as chief, when you just sit at your desk going, wow, I've kind of promoted myself into a position I absolutely hate now. But I worked hard to get there. Every day's a learning experience. Even as chief, there was a couple things I looked back and went, well, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Learn from that experience right there. Sometimes it's not fun being the top guy.
Yeah.
In any organization. But
absolutely, yeah.
But that's what I worked hard to get there. So I got nobody to blame but myself.
Yeah, I think the novelty of being in charge quickly wears off. Whether it's a business or whether it's the police, or as you say, with greater power comes greater responsibility, and that's something you might not have anticipated. Becoming the chief. Was that something you planned to do in your police career, or was that something that kind of came upon you and you thought, right, let's give this a go?
I was always happy in whatever position I was in. So when I first started my career, I was a patrol officer in a patrol car. I aspired to be a detective and go into. So when there was an opening, I leaped into that and learned and spent most of my career doing detective things. When the opportunity came up to promote to the next position, which was lieutenant, which is more of an administrative position, it just seemed like the natural progression. And then one day my chief said, I'm leaving. And I thought, wow, I have an opportunity where I had to test and beat out other people, but it was like, wow, I never thought I could be in charge. And my career went from catching bad guys and helping people to now more of an administrative position. I felt that was more of my challenge, or my calling was more of behind the scenes administration, leadership, things like that. So that's how I ended up in that position. And as I say, I worked hard, and I had to take testing for that, written test, oral examinations in front of a panel, and interviews to aspire to the chief position. And also, I was very proud. I remember the day saying, wow, I run a police department. Because it seems like yesterday, it was my first day as a police dispatcher answering the phone.
Yeah.
And being the new kid, and I literally washed police cars in my career. When I started, all right, kid, go out and wash the car. And okay. If I can't drive it, I'll wash it. That's fine with me. It was, that was great. And it offered me so many opportunities. I was on a tactical team, like a SWAT team.
Wow.
I was trained in special weapons, and I did some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it ran its course, and it was like, what's next? And they're really, after sitting at the top and there's no other place to go, it was just kind of the passion for it was working its way. I didn't know where I was going, but I was kind of done there.
Yeah.
I say the relationship expired.
As they do sometimes. I think if I had to put a number one question a lot of people have for, SWAT team, the army, police, it'd be, what's it like being shot at, and what's it like being in a situation where you have to shoot? I think that'd be a solid number one. And for you, probably it seems a bit, remedial and continuous, but, if you had to sum up, that situation and the changes in your mindset, changes in your body while that's happening, do you think about training? Do you think about, what's going on there?
As my number one answer for that as a training officer is everything relies back on training. And if you don't have any, you're basically be like a computer looking for a file that doesn't exist. And you go into literally that little wheel in your head will keep spinning. And you go into a tactical fetal position, which you just curl up in a ball. So that being said, you train for the worst of everything, which honestly, on a tactical team was actually safer, because anytime we did an operation or something, we trained for it.
Yeah.
It's the patrol officer who just gets a call to go to a house. They don't know the layout of the floor. They don't know how many occupants are expected to be in there, even though, so it's, or on any traffic stop, you have no idea who this person is when you stop the car. They could have robbed a bank 2 states ago and you have no idea that they're wanted, but so it's the patrol officer. So that's where training comes back over and over and over. And there's excellent books by Gavin DeBecker called The Gift of Fear. And what it basically comes down to is when you have that weird feeling inside of you, listen to it.
Yeah.
It's right. Which now, working as a school officer, I teach situational awareness, which is funny because in the yoga world, we call it mindfulness.
Yeah.
Like in the yoga world, you walk outside and go, wow, the grass is really green today. It's a beautiful day. In the situational awareness, you walk outside going, it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Why is that man wearing a trench coat? It's the same thing. It's paying attention to your surroundings. So being present, get your face out of your dumb phone. Actually, I have a class I teach to the staff at the school on situational, pay attention. Also to listen to that feeling you have inside you. And that's what Gavin DeBecker's book is about, The Gift of Fear, which I recommend to everybody. When you have that feeling of danger, listen to it, even if you cannot explain it. And then where that fits into police world, there's many times, and this takes training. When you've done it, for a year or so, and sometimes you've made a mistake, when you're lucky you didn't get hurt or worse. But if you walk up on that car and you just get a weird vibe, like something's going on here more than just a speeding ticket or a headlight out, listen, you're probably right. You may not be able to understand what it is, and it may need further investigations. But if you've got it could have been as simple as one word in the conversation that the person said that just didn't fit right, or a movement that they did. And sometimes you may be able to articulate what it is. Otherwise, you might just say, something ain't right. Yeah. And we all have that feeling. We've done it before where we've been in a situation going, something just doesn't feel right here. I need to get out.
Yeah.
Whether you were, you were just, in a parking garage, or you just got a weird vibe about somebody, and you could, it could be, doesn't have to be a life and death situation.
Yeah.
But when you feel that, listen to it. And that's what I've always told my officers. If you go into a scene and you just don't know why, something doesn't feel right, make sure you're there not by yourself. Or if you can, get out and wait for help. There's no rush. We'll come back later. You can wait outside in another room or something like that. So to get into those, situations, fortunately, I was never shot at. I was shot towards once. And I say towards because somebody was target shooting in the woods. And that's what the call I was going on. And they never even, which is kind of my fault. I should have announced my presence a little more. But they weren't shooting directly at me, but they were shooting toward me, which woke me up enough. It was a weird sound of being on the other end of the gun. I'm used to being on the handle end of it, not the barrel end of it, which caught my attention on that, And then the usual question you get after that is, have you ever shot anybody or things like that? And fortunately, I've never had to go that route. Have I pointed my pistol at somebody with all intentions? Yeah, more than one occasion. Fortunately, the people listened to me and did what was, and I'm very grateful. That's the last thing I want to be doing. It's not television. Your life will change dramatically. I have several friends who've been on the shooting end and the receiving end, and their life and their family's life changed dramatically. It's not TV where you have a shootout and then everybody goes out for a drink afterwards and the next episode rolls around. Your life will change. Your career will change. You could have kids in your school that are now going to get hassled, or something could come of that. That's what you signed up for. And to me, it says I can't do enough is training. Because that's where you're going to fall back onto your training. And if you have none, or you have poor training, or just going through the motions, you're training yourself to fail. Yeah. And the problem, it's a survival mindset. No matter what happens, I'm going to survive this.
Yeah.
That's big time what's going on. And fortunately, if you're, play it smart and not TV cowboy cop, set yourself up for success. If we had a call of a domestic dispute going on, we're not going by ourselves. I'm not going to a fair fight.
Yeah.
I'm going to show up with 5 people. I had one guy one time, he was sitting in our cell for processing, and he was yelling, saying, it took 5 guys to take me down. That's because we couldn't find 6, okay? If we had 6 officers, we would have had 6 people take you down. We're not going to a fair fight.
Yeah, well, especially when people, you don't. I think a big element to it is you don't know what situation you're going into. If as a domestic abuse case, you don't know, if that guy's got a gun. You don't know what's behind the wall. So, you joke about saying, if we had 6 guys, we would have talked to them. Is because you literally have no idea, as you said earlier on.
I don't want to get hurt. Right, as simple as that. I don't want to have to get hurt. And you know what? As we were talking before, it's about attitude of the officer. There's many times where I said to somebody, "Look, this is what we're going to do here. You're going to turn around. You're going to put your hand. You're going to be under arrest. And then once they get over that, but this is how it's going to go. Okay? We're not going to give you a hard time. You're not going to give us a hard time. I have to do a whole bunch of paperwork. You're going to sit in the holding area, whatnot. It's not going to be painful. We're going to move things along. If I'm going to get you out of here as fast as possible." And most people will go along with that.
Yeah.
I'm not the enemy here, okay? You called us, first of all. We didn't just wander into your living room. If you want to be angry at anybody, be angry at the person that you're arguing with or whatever got you into it. And most of the time, people would go with that. Yeah. And that's, what I would, really lean into with young officers. Stop going in there, and being a jerk off and demanding this and demanding that. There's nothing, it's not a sign of weakness to ask people.
Yeah.
And even with like handcuffing, somebody say, "Well, what was your technique for handcuffing?" I said, "I don't know. Tell people to turn around, put their hands behind their back. That works."
Yeah.
It works most of the time. There is a bit to it that they understand that what you represent wearing a uniform and the 4 other officers you have standing behind you, that does help. I'm not going to take that out of the equation there. But there's no reason to be rude or I don't have to explain to you how much of a tough guy I am. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, and that's part of proper training with new officers, is if they're a bit insecure, it comes out that way.
Yeah.
That they need to overwhelm this person verbally to let them know who's in charge.
Yeah.
And that comes with experience. And as we talked to earlier about good field training, and which I'm saying I had, I had to be taught that. But I had a great group of men who taught me by example. Very rarely did I see them have to use physical force with people.
Yeah, because they did the things before it that prevented having to use the physical.
A good officer is a good talker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. And just we're gonna get through this. Especially I've had people that were violent, and maybe we had to scuffle around a little bit to get them under control. But once that's done, we're done now. Okay. Let me just do the stupid paperwork I have to do. I'll get you out of here as fast as possible. If I can keep you out from going to the jail, you're going to be released, which is most of the time is what happens. Unless for something serious.
Yeah.
But then again, I've had people who fought with me from the moment I saw them to the moment I dropped them. There was just no convincing them. But that's actually a very small percentage of that. Most people, I always enjoyed when the court administrator would say, "Hey, this person came in to pay their fines. They say you were so nice and you gave them handfuls of tickets and you arrested them. And they said you were nice." I said, "But you're supposed to. Why wouldn't I be nice?" There was no reason for a bad attitude.
Yeah. Well, it's getting pretty late here, and I think that there's no better place to leave it than that.
Excellent.
Why wouldn't you be nice? And listen, Jan, I really appreciate you doing this, and thank you for being you and putting out that domino effect of positivity that you do, and speaking the way you do, and helping all the people that you do. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being a member of this world, especially right now. I think people need to listen and look up to people like yourselves and learn. And yeah, best of luck. I hope all your family are well during the pandemic and during the riots. And I do hope your country managed to pull it together. And
we'll get it together.
But yeah, thank you very much, Jan.
You're very welcome. If any of your listeners wanted to get in touch with me, whether they had interest in a law enforcement career or everything from yoga to firearms training, my email is Jan Wright, JanWright 2020 @gmail.com. They can just send me an email and see if I can help them out.
Fantastic. Right. Thank you very much, Jan. And
Thank you.
yeah, if you enjoyed this one, subscribe, like, all that common stuff, yeah, people say on videos. We've got plenty more interesting guests coming up. And thanks very much to Jan Wright. I've enjoyed this chat a lot, and I feel like, there's a lot of valuable things there to learn. So hope everyone's well, and good night.